Hi, this is Michael. Welcome to the third installment of the World War II Book Guy. And today's book is Death Traps, The Survival of an American Armored Division in World War II by Belton Cooper. Now, Belton Cooper was an ordnance officer with the 3rd Armored Division in the European Theater in World War II. Forward is by Stephen Ambrose. And it's a very interesting book on several levels. First, it deals with the Ordnance Battalion operations and how they would recover, repair, and return to service Sherman tanks during World War II. But it also gets to the larger argument about the Sherman tank. Now, he didn't name this book Ordnance Battalion Operations. He named it Death Traps, The Survival of an American Armored Division. When, as the author points out, when the division first entered combat in late June of 1944, it had 224 Sherman tanks on TO&E. In the 10 months roughly of combat, 648 Shermans were completely destroyed, 700 more combat damaged and repaired to service, a loss rate of about 580%. And that gets to the central theme of this book and the argument about the Sherman tank. The argument against it is simply, why did we send our young men to war in a tank that was inferior to the tank of our opponent? Now, some people will say, no, the Sherman tank was a war winner. Well, it was, because we built 50,000 of them. And those people who support the Sherman tank invariably were not the crewmen on a Sherman tank. So what was the deal? What was the issue with the Sherman tank? Well, when you're designing a tank, there are 3 aspects that you have to consider: maneuverability, armor, and firepower. Now, the Sherman was a maneuverable tank. It was easy to maintain, and in that sense, it was a good tank. Where it fell short was in armor and firepower, or really the balance between the two. In a tank, you want a gun that will penetrate the armor of your opponent at a range that their gun won't penetrate yours, and that was the problem. The 75 millimeter short barrel gun on a Sherman could not penetrate the armor of its German opponents at a range where the German tanks could penetrate its armor. In fact, some models of German tanks, like the Panther and the Tiger, it could not penetrate the frontal armor hardly at any range. They had to come up to the side to penetrate it. Now, the Germans, on the other hand, had the same size gun. It was a 75 millimeter gun, a family of guns that equipped their Mark IVs and their Panther, which was the most numerous 2 models of tanks that they had. But it had a longer barrel, which gave it higher velocity. Second law of physics, force equals mass times velocity. It had more penetrating power. Now, that left the Sherman at a great disadvantage, and there were a lot of field expedients that Sherman's crews put in to try to alleviate that, usually adding armor. They would put logs, sandbags, even concrete on the front of the tank to try to improve it. So you're wondering, if they're doing these field expedients, why didn't they actually do something in the production of the tank? In the very latter part of the war, the Mark IV E8, the Easy 8, came out that had a better gun, some other minor modifications, but it had a more powerful gun. The British saw the issue with the tank earlier on, and prior to D-Day, started equipping about 1 in 4 of their tanks with a 17-pounder gun, which had a higher velocity, longer barrel. They called it the Firefly. So the problems with this tank were obvious and well known. But it was easy to produce, and that's what we were trying to do. And the problem came in 2 sets. First was the number of Shermans that were lost, but we also never considered the losses of the crews. So as the war went on, as the author points out quite a bit, the crews of the tanks were less and less experienced. In fact, a lot of them, when they were handing these repaired tanks back, had never even been in a Sherman tank, and his Ordnance Battalion was forced to spend maybe a few hours, up to 1 day, training these kids to go into these tanks to go fight against superior German tanks. And that's really the interest to me of the book, is having that discussion at a very personal level. So I think it's a really good book. I think there's arguments either way on where the Sherman stand, but you cannot argue against his position from the level of what he saw in the personal level during operations. So anyway, I think it's a really good book. I think it's a really good read. So until next time, the next installment, we're going to deal with a series. It's the 6-volume set, Winston Churchill on World War II. But until then, I'm Michael, World War II Book Guy. Thank you.